Colleagues, our commitment to educating young minds and hearts in the classical Western tradition is a good and noble one. And we are as committed to it today as we were when those first teachers and staff at Veritas laid the groundwork for our consequential enterprise back in 2002. At the heart of our approach is an unyielding belief in the dignity and everlasting worth of each individual. We believe a person is first an individual act of existence, unique and beautiful in their own right, with agency, free will, and accountable for their actions. They are not first a member of a tribe or class or culture or narrow group from which they derive their essential worth and identity. They are first a human being. And as such, we believe each unique person shares a common immaterial form or common essence with all other persons, which constitutes them as equal, regardless of any material differences that may exist between them. We absolutely reject the notion that a person's value or status is constituted by immutable identity markers like sex or race, and likewise by today's more fluid notions of identity around sexuality, gender, class, ethnicity, culture, and the like. This means that we believe each person in their essence is as equal as every other person, that it is true to say that all persons are created equal, that at the very core of what they are equal to all others. And that because of this, all groupings of individual persons still must be regarded as essentially equal in their humanity to all other groupings. That no group identity of any kind renders an individual more valuable or less valuable, more human or less human. All of this is to say that our shared essence, our humanity, binds us, it unifies us in a way that transcends the physical, emotional, cultural, and intellectual differences we have. That view of the human person is one we must pass on to our students. To ignore or discount the unity at our core is folly. It is to divide and tribalize us as human beings. It is destructive to all that is true, good, and beautiful within our society. This view of the human person is one of the bedrocks of a Great Hearts Academy. It sits alongside another essential belief, the one that I stated at the beginning, that we believe educating young minds and hearts within the classical Western tradition is good and noble. The Western tradition is beautiful, it is nurturing, and classical education has proven to be the most liberating and fulfilling of educations human beings have ever devised. We do not question its value, just as we do not deny that, like any human tradition, it has its fault lines, its errors, its limitations, and its sins. There are those who wish to paint the West with the singular brush of oppression. They want to say that the West is nothing more than the story of a singular group of white men dominating any and all people outside of their narrow group. That it is a story of greed and genocide and sexism and racism, rendering it a corrupt and murderous tradition whose obsolescence is both necessary and morally justified. This is a false narrative and an evil one, I might add. It is truer to say that the West is riddled with error and moral failing, as all other cultural and intellectual traditions are, but that the West is also the most self-critical among them, and the one place where liberation has been a mainstay. The West is, in fact, the only place where abolition was forcefully advanced and took root. We offer our students a deep engagement in the Western tradition, not only because as American schools, that is the tradition from which our national culture, institutions, language, and customs have stemmed, but also because we believe that the West is worth knowing and provides the student the strongest, most comprehensive introduction to notions of science, law, philosophy, and literature. The ideological movements of late, from hashtag disrupt text, which has as its goal the decolonizing or de-Westernizing of American K-12 curricula, to the varied expressions of neo-Marxist and postmodern ideology, most notably advanced through critical theories, are all squarely aligned against the commitments I noted earlier. To adopt them is to adopt a mission adverse to the one Great Hearts was founded to advance. There is something to note here, though, about the role these and other destructive ideologies play in a free society's ongoing reflection and wider conversation about what the good is and how to achieve it. As I see it, they play a similar role to the one that heresy plays within religious traditions. As you are likely aware, a heresy is a belief that deviates from or is contrary to the established teaching or doctrine of a faith. Deviation from the well-established, long-standing core ideas that make up the foundational propositions of that faith, propositions that, were they to be changed, the very faith would be changed along with it. For a Buddhist, this would be denying the Four Noble Truths. For a Jew, it would be denying that God is one. Things that touch the core tenets of that faith. What we must understand about heresies is that they are attractive to people not because of any blatant falsehood they may be advancing. Rather, they have power because their critique quite often carries some kernel of truth within them, something that must be contended with. A heresy sometimes leverages a misunderstanding about a core tenet of the faith, or more often today, is a response to either the misapplication of that core belief or a hypocritical abandonment altogether of it by its leaders. This then calls into question the core belief, and it forces the adherents of the faith to respond. It forces the faithful to consider again why they believe what they do, and to better articulate why it is worth believing and ensure that its adherents live it out, not just in word, but deed. Now, while the propositions that make up the American tradition are not religious per se, to deviate from the core belief clearly stated in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal would be a kind of heresy. This proposition cuts through the heart of the entire American project and is in itself a deeply metaphysical claim. It is a claim that takes as its center the view of the person we described earlier. And it confers upon us individually and as a nation a certain responsibility. The institutions we organize for any and all purposes must consistently strive to honor the equality and therefore inherent dignity of all people. Where they fail to do so is a violation of our core beliefs and commitments as Americans and must be rectified. Racism is such a violation. This is obvious. And where it has happened in the past and continues to happen, it opens the door for people to question the core tenets of the American project, questioning the principle of equality itself, framing it as an ideological instrument of the oppressor against the oppressed, and offering another different principle from which to ground human community, equity as one other grounding instead of equality. The most profound current expression of this distrust and the heretical notion stemming from it can be found in critical race theory. Now, this is not the space to examine in depth this particular ideology, its roots in the neo-Marxist Frankfurt School, and as well as the epistemological and sociological vision of Michel Foucault. There will, however, be time and space to do that in the near future. More importantly for us now, is to accept the fact that this ideology, one that attempts to re-racialize American society, has gained so much acceptance in part because the sin of racism in America has and continues to touch real people. And that fact leaves people vulnerable to entertaining new solutions, even if those solutions are themselves racist and destructive. We must contend with this discontent. We must ask ourselves what fault lines and limitations linger in our own community. We must look at ourselves first. Are we living up to the ideals of the American founding? Are we living up to the view of the human person that centers their dignity and worth in their very being? Are we truly living out our mission to form the minds and hearts of students through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty? All students? Because we are not fully great hearts until within our walls, every child, no matter their circumstance, no matter their color or creed, finds the greatest expression of love there. That is to say, that our students receive from us an unrelenting commitment, an inexhaustible drive to help them know the truth, to recognize and live out what is good and love what is beautiful. The easy kid and the tough kid, the suburban kid and the one living in poverty, the common one and the special one. We are what we set out to be when every kid can feel at home within our walls. We are also what we set out to be when we passionately and articulately defend the nobility and goodness of classical education and the Western tradition. We must do that again, ever anew, and with greater clarity and resolve. It is under attack. It is being labeled the most horrific things, but it is worthy of defense, and great hearts must lead the way. This work is not a short one. It cannot and will not be a box-checking exercise intended to give the semblance of good deeds being done without any real substance. Over this next year and years beyond, we want to reaffirm our culture of continual improvement, of self-reflection, and love of our mission. It is not so much a project as it is a pledge. We are calling it Pluribus Unum, and it is born out of a desire to not only be the very best K-12 academies in the country, but to show the way to all others on how to move through trying times in hope and in love. Pluribus Unum will afford us the space and time to look again at first things, to discuss where we can improve, to hear from leaders across the country on everything from why the classics matter and must be protected, to how can we approach classroom management with more wisdom and joy, to how do we make our schools accessible to students from all backgrounds. It will allow us to look again more deeply at the ideological fronts opposed to our project, understand their roots, and how to respond to those who would question the virtue and worth of our school's curriculum and culture. Through it all, we intend to get better, to become more of who we set out to be. And we intend to do it together, not as some top-down initiative, but as a community in common pursuit of what is best for our students and their families. Your headmasters will have more to share in specifics, and we look forward to getting feedback and other ideas from colleagues on the opportunities before us. We have a great and meaningful year ahead, and I am so honored to be doing this work with all of you. Thank you.